Okay, let's get into this. Decepticons. You hear that and, well, you think giant robots, right?
Cartoons.
Exactly. Popular franchise. Big battles.
But imagine taking that name for a real street gang in New York City, late 80s, early 90s. It's quite a contrast.
It really is. These cartoon villains, bad guys from a kid's show, inspiring something, well, very real and pretty intense.
Yeah. And what's fascinating is looking at the sources, historical bits, even hip-hop lyrics, this wasn't just some blip.
No, it seems they left a real mark, surprisingly deep for a group that wasn't around for, decades or anything.
Right, so for everyone listening, trying to get the full picture quickly, that's our aim here.
Yeah, we want to unpack who the Decepticons were, their story, and I guess why they still echo a bit, culturally speaking.
Precisely. We'll dive into how they started, what they did, and these kind of unexpected connections that kept their name alive.
Think of it as the essential rundown, the key facts, the interesting angles on this sort of shadowy piece of NYC history.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Where and when are we talking? We're looking at Brooklyn, New York. Sources point to them getting started in the late 1980s.
And they were active into the early 90s?
Yeah, active into the early 1990s. That seems to be the main period.
And the name, let's circle back to that because it's just so unusual.
It really is. They specifically chose Decepticons from Transformers.
Right. Why, though?
Apparently, the idea was to represent a sense of brotherhood. That's what some accounts suggest.
Brotherhood through the bad guys. It's an interesting choice. Kind of makes you wonder about their whole mindset, doesn't it?
It definitely does. What kind of identity were they building? And the very first group, apparently it was just 3 boys.
3 kids.
Yeah, from 2 different schools in Brooklyn. And they even had these, like, subgroup names, also from the cartoon.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Megatron was the name for the original group. Then you had Rumble and Cyclonus popping up, based out of Bushwick.
Huh. And wasn't there a specific school mentioned? Brooklyn Tech?
Yeah, there's a strong suggestion or belief that Brooklyn Tech High School was one of the places where it all kind of coalesced initially.
So you pictured this starting small, but then it spreads. Was it like a really organized expansion?
Actually, no.
Hmm?
That's one of the key things. It seems to have spread really fast, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx,
Yeah.
but very independently.
Me.
Meaning there wasn't really a formal structure, no headquarters sending out orders,
So groups just started calling themselves Decepticons.
pretty much. Lots of different divisions or crews just popped up, claimed the name, but without any, official okay from the original guys.
Wow. So the name itself had this power, this appeal, even without a hierarchy?
Seems like it. It sort of took on a life of its own.
And didn't that also change who was involved, demographics-wise?
Yeah, that's another interesting point. Well, the Brooklyn origins might have been one group, these outer borough factions that sprang up.
Mm-hmm.
They were often predominantly Latino. So the idea resonated across different communities.
Okay, so we have these scattered groups. What about membership? Were there female members?
Yes, there were. Sources mention the term Deceptinettes for them.
Deceptinettes, okay. And getting in, I imagine it wasn't easy.
No. The initiation rituals sound pretty brutal, frankly. For the guys, it was the jump-in.
Which is,
Basically getting beaten up by a bunch of members,
yeah,
a violent hazing to prove you're tough enough, I guess.
right. That idea of proving yourself through pain.
And for the young women, the initiation, yeah, it's really disturbing. According to Isis Sapgrant, a former member who spoke out,
Yeah.
she described girls being sexed in,
Hmm.
assaulted by multiple male members as initiation.
That's horrific. It paints a very dark picture behind the name and the idea of brotherhood.
It absolutely does. It highlights the exploitation and danger inherent in that world.
So, given that kind of entry, what were their main activities on the street? What were they known for?
Robberies. That seems to be the most frequent act of violence tied to them.
Okay, robberies. But was there a particular style?
Yes. They became known for this flash mob style approach. Speed and surprise were everything.
Flash mob style, like sudden, overwhelming force.
Exactly. They'd hit fast, overwhelm their targets usually through sheer numbers, and speed grab what they could and just vanish,
Yeah.
mugging people very quickly.
And the subways were a key spot for this.
Definitely. Think about it. Cramped train cars, noisy, chaotic. It's an ideal environment for that kind of hit-and-run robbery.
So the scenario was like doors open, they rush in, grab chains, wallets, whatever.
Precisely. Cause confusion, grab valuables, and then melt back into the crowd or onto the platform before anyone could really react. Opportunistic and fast.
Wow. And there's something else too, right? A kind of disturbing game.
Yeah, this thing called one-punch knockout. Sources say it was primarily the Decepticons who did this.
One punch knockout. What was the point?
Just that. Trying to knock out a random, unsuspecting person with a single punch.
Yeah.
Just senseless violence.
That shows a really shocking level of aggression. Just awful.
Truly. But then, moving into the early 90s, their presence starts to fade a bit.
They kind of disappear from the headlines.
Yeah, they become less prominent. But here's where the story takes another weird turn. The music connection.
Right. Some former members actually went into hip-hop.
Exactly. It's quite surprising. You have some really notable names who either were members or associated with the Decepticons.
Like who?
Well, Sticky Fingays and Fredro Starr from Onyx, Rock from Helta Skelta, Dallas Penn, the writer and personality, and late Sean Price.
Sean Price. Wow. Okay, that's quite a list. It makes you think about how those street experiences might have fueled their music later on.
Absolutely. There's this complex link between that life and creative expression.
Yeah.
Did it shape their lyrics, their worldview? You have to assume so.
And it wasn't just the artists having links. The gang itself got mentioned in the music.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It pops up in lyrics. Necro has referenced them.
Huh?
And probably the most famous reference is Jay-Z
Yeah.
in BK Anthem.
What did he say?
He has that line. Wasn't safe on the A-Train, DG, or the F Decepticons. Low-life niggas snatch the polos off your chest.
Wow. That directly calls out the subway robberies and the clothes they targeted, like polo gear. Paints a vivid picture.
It really does. It captures that specific fear, that specific time on those subway lines.
Hmm.
It shows how this local thing became part of the city's cultural memory.
Any other big musical references?
Yeah, Smith & Wesson, they have a track called PNC,
Oh, yeah, in
Partners in Crime. And the song was actually dedicated to a guy named Sean Grady, also known as Rambo.
And he was connected?
Reportedly, yeah.
Oh.
A former leader within the Decepticons.
So the song acknowledges him.
And more. There's a lyric in PNC that's pretty explicit. It goes, shit got thick, we still managed to stick around doing crimes with Decepticons of a sign of the times.
Whoa. That's a direct admission, almost. Doing crimes with Decepticons.
Yeah. It's a clear acknowledgement of that history, those connections.
Yeah.
A sign of the times, as they put it.
So they weren't totally under the radar back then, were they? People knew about them.
No, not entirely invisible. There was even a New York Times article back in March 1989.
Really? What did it say?
It specifically talked about the fear the gang was instilling, particularly among students. So their impact was definitely being felt and reported on, at least to some extent.
Okay, so let's try and sum this up. You've got this gang, late 80s, early 90s NYC.
Right. Brooklyn origins.
Takes its name from Transformers villains, weirdly enough, as a symbol of unity.
Yeah, a distorted kind of brotherhood.
Spreads rapidly, kind of chaotically, across different boroughs, different groups.
No real central control. Known for violent initiations, flash mob robberies, especially on subways.
Then they fade, but this strange legacy lives on in hip-hop.
Through former members becoming artists and through explicit lyrical references by major frontals like Jay-Z and Smith & Wesson.
The contrast is just stark, isn't it? Cartoon name, very serious, very real violence and fear, and then this unexpected afterlife in music.
It really is quite something. Which kind of leads to a final thought for people to chew on.
Go for it.
Okay, so they weren't around for that long, relatively speaking. Why do you think they left such a mark? Enough to be name-dropped in songs decades later.
Good question.
What does that tell us about, youth culture, violence, maybe even how pop culture like cartoons can seep into real life in unexpected ways?
It makes you think about how these like hyper-local stories, things happening on specific streets or subway lines,
Yeah.
how they can somehow become part of a bigger cultural story later on. It's fascinating how history works sometimes.